Welcome to the Missing Dots. Today we are doing something different. We're not here to increase your emotion. We are here to check the historical record. After the Battle of Karbala, what exactly happened to the bodies? Who buried them? How soon? Was it a mass grave or 72 separate graves? And what is the real documentary trail of the head of Imam Hussein? These questions have clear answers in early sources and in forensic science. On the Missing Dots, we will lay those answers out without adding later layers of storytelling. Stay till the end if you want the missing pieces filled with evidence, not assumptions.
Yeah, it's a pretty profound shift in perspective, really. Moving away from just the emotional weight of it all and looking at the physical, historical reality of the ground itself.
Right. And I really want to bring you, the listener, directly into that physical reality. I want you to imagine the setting for a second. It's October in the year 680 CE. So, Muharram, 61 AH. You are literally standing in the Iraqi desert.
It's a harsh environment.
Exactly. The battle has just ended. The dust is literally settling over the plain of Karbala. And, for centuries, the storytelling around what happened next has been layered with all this poetry. And that has its place, obviously.
It definitely does, yeah.
But today, we want to strip the poetry away and just look at the stark facts of that immediate aftermath.
Right, because when you separate the later traditions from the earliest historical records, a very different picture emerges. It's harsher, but honestly, in many ways, it's even more profound.
So I think we have to start with the most immediate physical question, like how long did the bodies actually remain on the battlefield before being buried?
Right, the timeline.
Yeah, because if you listen to popular narratives, you often hear that the bodies lay unburied out in the open desert for weeks or, I don't know, even months, until the captive families returned from Damascus.
Yeah, that is a very common narrative. But when we look at forensic science, specifically taphonomy, that timeline is just, it's biologically impossible.
Wait, taphonomy, just to clarify for everyone.
Oh, right. Taphonomy is the science of how organisms decay over time. And in this case, because of the Iraqi heat, the decay process is incredibly fast.
Right, because we were talking about October in the desert, daytime temperatures there, they consistently exceed 40 degrees Celsius.
Exactly. That's over 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The air is super arid, humidity is practically zero, and the solar radiation is just intense.
It's basically a furnace.
It really is. And under those specific conditions, an unburied human body undergoes really rapid putrefaction. Within 48 to 72 hours, you'd see extensive tissue liquefaction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and massive insect colonization. It happens fast.
Let me just make sure I understand the mechanism here, because modern forensic investigators use a specific formula for this, don't they? Like accumulated degree days.
Yes, exactly. Accumulated degree days.
So it's not just about how hot it is in a single moment. It's about the cumulative heat over time acting like a ticking clock.
That is spot on. It multiplies the temperature by the hours of exposure. In a 40-degree desert, that biological clock is just sprinting. The heat accelerates the chemical breakdown of the cells.
So the body is essentially baking in the sun.
Baking, yes. While internal bacteria are just rapidly consuming the tissues, it's a chemical certainty. You simply cannot pause biology,
Right. So if they had been left out for weeks or months, like the popular story goes, what would we actually be looking at?
Honestly, they would have been completely skeletonized. The remains would have been scattered by scavengers, too.
Like desert foxes and vultures.
Desert foxes, wild dogs, vultures, yeah. The bodies would be entirely unrecognizable. So the idea that they were intact and identifiable months later, it just violates every known principle of forensic science.
SubhanAllah. So the science says immediate burial was an absolute undeniable necessity? Do the early historical records actually back up what the science is telling us?
They do, perfectly actually. The earliest and most reliable chronicles, like the ones by al-Tabari and al-Baladhuri, they are totally aligned with the forensic reality.
Okay, so who actually buried them then?
It was a local Arab tribe, the Banu Asad. They live in a nearby village called al-Ghadiriya, and the records say they came and performed the burials within 1 to 3 days.
1 to 3 days. So by the 11th or 13th of Muharram, everyone was in the ground.
Exactly.
But hold on, that brings up a really confusing point for me about the Umayyad army, Umar ibn Saad's forces, because they were right there. And I know they buried their own dead, right?
Yes, they did.
I think the records say they buried like 88 of their own fallen soldiers before they left the area. So why did they go through all that trouble to dig graves for their men, but just leave the bodies of Imam Hussein in his camp completely exposed?
Well, it was a calculated move. It wasn't laziness. Leaving the opposing camp exposed was a deliberate act of psychological warfare.
Just to send a message.
Exactly. It projected total victory. It was meant to demoralize anyone in the region who might, even think of rebelling. By leaving them under the sun, they were intentionally denying them the basic Islamic right of a dignified burial.
It was the ultimate insult,
It
really.
was absolute ultimate insult.
But okay, I hear what you're saying about the Banu Asad coming out to do it. But let's be real here. They are a tiny village. The Umayyad army just massacred the Prophet's grandson and his entire camp.
Right.
Wouldn't these villagers be utterly terrified to even go near that battlefield? Like, if they saw this happening on the 10th of Muharram, why not just bury them immediately that day?
Security. It comes down to basic security. Approaching a hostile, victorious imperial army while they were still occupying the field, that would have been absolute suicide for those villagers.
They would have been slaughtered too.
Without a doubt. So they had to wait. The historical sources confirm they waited until the Umayyad forces actually marched on.
And then they just walked out there.
Not even then. They approached the battlefield under the cover of night. They had to avoid detection by any remaining scouts or patrols that might have been left behind.
Okay, so I want you to imagine you are one of these villagers. You are sneaking out in the pitch dark into the aftermath of this massive massacre, knowing you only have a window of a few days before biology just takes its toll.
It's a terrifying scenario.
It really is. And that brings us to a massive logistical problem. Because the image we see in artwork today, or, if you visit Karbala right now, you see 72 distinct, beautifully separated, labeled graves.
Right.
Did a small group of terrified villagers really dig 72 individual graves in the hard desert clay in the middle of the night?
The short answer is no, they didn't.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, the image of 72 separated and labeled graves is a much later architectural development. It's devotional. It is absolutely not the physical reality of the year 61 AH.
Because if you've ever tried to dig in baked desert clay, you know how impossible it is, doing it 72 times in the dark with limited tools.
It's incredibly labor-intensive. The ground there is like concrete. But frankly, the even bigger obstacle was identification.
Oh, because of the decapitations.
Yes. We have to remember the brutal reality of what the Umayyad army actually did before they left. They decapitated the fallen, they took the heads as trophies to Damascus,
Right.
and they also stripped the bodies of their armor, their weapons, and any valuable clothing. It was taken as war booty.
SubhanAllah. That is a heavy, heavy reality to sit with.
It is.
So you have these villagers from the Banu Asad walking onto this field in the dark, trying to honor the dead, but they're looking at headless bodies that have been stripped and mutilated. Facial recognition is completely gone. How could they possibly know who was who?
It was a monumental task. I mean, they had to rely on whatever clues were left behind. Scars, specific battle wounds, maybe remnants of undergarments.
Or maybe tribal knowledge of who was standing where during the fight.
Exactly. Positioning on the battlefield was a clue. But for the vast majority of the fallen, individual identification was just simply impossible.
So what do you do in that situation? You have dozens of unidentified bodies, limited time, hard ground. There must be a precedent for this in Islamic history, right? Like, what did they do in earlier battles?
You follow the Islamic legal norms that were already established for battlefield casualties. And we see this exact precedent set by the Prophet Muhammad at the Battle of Uhud.
Right. Mass graves.
Exactly. When you have mass casualties, limited time, and limited resources, Islamic law allows and actually encourages collective burial.
Makes total sense.
The early sources, like al-Shank al-Mufid, are very clear on this. Most of the companions and family members were buried in a single mass trench. It was known as the Qabr al-Shuhada, or the Qabr al-Jami.
A single trench. And where was this trench physically dug?
It was dug right at the feet of Imam Hussein.
Okay, so the vast majority are in this collective trench. But there are a few individual graves, aren't there?
Yes, there are. Only a handful of figures received distinct, separate graves, and that was strictly because their bodies or their locations on the field were explicitly recognizable.
Like Imam Hussein himself, obviously.
Right. Imam Hussein was buried at the central location where he fell. And his eldest son, Ali Akbar, his position on the field was known, so he was buried in a distinct spot right at his father's feet.
And what about Abbas ibn Ali? Because if you go there today, his shrine is quite a bit further away from the main complex.
Exactly. Abbas fell during an isolated engagement near the Al-Qami Canal. He was trying to bring water back to the camp.
Right.
So because of the severe trauma to his body and the physical distance from the main camp, the Banu Asad just buried him right there where he fell.
That makes sense. Were there any others?
Habib ibn Muzahir also received a separate grave, but that was largely because he was a known prominent elder of the Banu Asad tribe themselves.
Oh, so his own clansmen recognized him.
Exactly. His own people recognized his body and they honored him individually.
So, I'm just thinking aloud here. If someone travels to Karbala today for pilgrimage, they walk into this massive, beautiful courtyard, and they see individual markers for the companions. If the physical reality is actually a mass trench, are those physical markers historically inaccurate?
Well, it helps to understand the difference between a physical grave and what we might call a theological grave.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
The physical grave, the actual forensic resting place of the remains from 61 AH, is that mass trench. The individual markers you see today, those were built centuries later by different dynasties.
Oh, I see.
They serve as theological or spiritual markers. They are designated places for pilgrims to focus their prayers and honor the specific memory of those individuals. But forensically speaking, the physical remains are collective.
That makes perfect sense. The marker is about honoring the memory. It's not necessarily marking the exact GPS coordinates of a specific body.
Exactly.
All right, so the Banu Asad managed to bury the bodies in a trench, but they were burying headless bodies. The Umayyads took the heads as trophies. Where did they actually take them? Because, I mean, you can't just carry human remains across a scorching desert for weeks.
You really can't.
Right, so how do you transport a head from Iraq all the way to Syria without it completely decomposing?
The historical texts actually detail this, which is fascinating. The Umayyad soldiers preserved the head in a vessel packed with camphor and salt. That slowed the decay during the long journey.
Wait, how does that work mechanically? I know camphor is used in traditional Islamic burials, but how does it actually preserve tissue?
Well, salt is a natural desiccant. It draws the moisture out of the tissues, and when you deprive bacteria of the water they need, they can't multiply as fast.
Okay, and the camphor?
Camphor is a volatile organic compound. It acts as a mild antimicrobial agent, and crucially, its strong scent masks the odor of decay.
So it's basically a crude embalming technique.
Exactly. Together, they act as a rudimentary form of embalming, just enough to preserve the physical features so the head could still be recognized when they finally arrived in Damascus.
That is fascinating and honestly pretty morbid all at once. So they make it to Damascus, but I've read that there are multiple places today claiming to have the head of Imam Hussein. How many are there actually?
It's one of the most complex histories of sacred relics in the medieval world, really. There are 5 competing geographical claims for the head, which is often referred to as Ras al-Hussein.
5?
Yeah, 5. They are Damascus, Karbala, Cairo, Ascalon, and Medina.
Wait, 5 locations? That makes no sense. We're talking about one physical head. How can 5 different cities across the Middle East legitimately claim to have it?
Well, obviously, they can't all have the physical remains. But each location represents a totally different layer of history, theology, or political power.
Okay, walk me through them. Start with Damascus.
Damascus is the earliest and most widely attested claim in the historical chronicles. Early historians record that the head was brought to the Umayyad Caliph, Yazid.
Right, the trophy we talked about.
Exactly. And it was eventually buried within the royal palace grounds or in the cemetery near the Umayyad Mosque. For the Umayyads, displaying the head in their capital was all about projecting imperial victory. It was a massive warning to anyone else thinking of challenging their rule.
It's the ultimate political trump card. Like, if you rebel, this is what happens to you.
Precisely.
But then there is the claim that it is in Karbala. If the Umayyads had it locked down in Damascus, how would it ever get back to Iraq?
So this is a very strong theological tradition, particularly within Shia Islam. It's known as Ilhaq or Al-Rad, which literally means the return or the reunification.
The reunification of the head with the body.
Yes. The tradition holds that Imam Zayn al-Abidin, after he was finally released from captivity in Damascus, was able to secure the head. He brought it back to Karbala to bury it with the body on the 20th of Safar.
Ah, so that's the Arba'in connection.
Exactly. Theologically, this represents the restoration of dignity and completeness for the Imam.
Okay, so we have Damascus as the early imperial record, and Karbala as the strong theological tradition of return. How on earth do Ascalon and Cairo enter the picture? Why would an Egyptian dynasty care about a relic from Iraq?
That brings us to the Fatimid dynasty, centuries later. The Fatimids were ruling in Egypt, and their entire claim to political and religious power was based on their descent from the Prophet's family.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. So according to their tradition, the head had been secretly moved from Damascus to Ascalon, which is in modern-day Palestine, and it was hidden there for centuries.
Okay.
Then, in the year 548 AH, which is around 1153 CE, Ascalon was facing a massive military threat from the Crusaders.
Ah, the Crusades. So the relic was in danger of being captured by Christian armies.
Exactly. So the Fatimid vizier ordered the head to be rescued from Ascalon and transferred to their capital in Cairo. They built this magnificent shrine for it, the al-Husayn Mosque, which, still stands today and is hugely important.
It really reminds me of kings hoarding saint bones in medieval Europe.
Yes, very similar dynamic.
Like, if you possessed a holy relic, you had God's favor, you had political legitimacy, and it drew pilgrims and wealth to your city. It sounds like the Fatimids moving the head to Cairo was just this brilliant political maneuver to cement their authority against the Crusaders.
It was a very strategic move, definitely.
But scientifically, if we look at this objectively today, can we verify any of these claims?
No, we cannot. Scientific verification is entirely impossible.
Why? Just because of the age?
That's a big part of it. You are talking about remains that are over 1,300 years old. There is no DNA reference sample to compare anything against.
Right, obviously.
Furthermore, these relics have been enclosed in shrines for centuries, and religious sensitivities mean they will never, ever be disturbed or opened for forensic testing.
So it really just comes down to historical probability and faith.
It does. From a strictly historical and codicological standpoint, the Damascus claim has the earliest written documentary evidence. The Karbala return claim has the deepest theological roots regarding the dignity of the Badr, and the Ascalon-Cairo claim emerges much later, precisely when the Fatimid dynasty needed a major political and religious anchor. Ultimately, where the head rests is a matter of tradition now, not forensic certainty.
Wow. Let's go back to the ground in Karbala for a minute.
Sure.
We established that the original physical footprint of 61 AH was just a mass trench and a few simple mounds of earth. How did that survive to become the massive architectural marvel we see today? I mean, millions of people visit it. How did that physical site endure when it was literally just dirt?
It endured despite incredible, violent efforts by the state to erase it. I mean, in the early decades, visiting the grave was actually incredibly dangerous.
I can imagine.
The Umayyad and early Abbasid caliphs kept the site under strict surveillance.
So you couldn't just walk up and pay your respects, you'd be arrested or killed?
Not openly, no. The early imams practiced taqiyya, or dissimulation, to protect their followers. They encouraged quiet, private visits, often under the cover of night.
Just like the original burial.
Exactly. Or they told people to just offer their spiritual remembrance from afar, from the safety of their own homes.
Were there any famous early visitors who actually braved that state surveillance, though?
There were. The very first recorded visitor was Jabir ibn Abdillah al-Ansari. He was a prominent elderly companion of the Prophet. He visited in the year 61 AH, very shortly after the battle.
Oh, wow.
And a few years later, in 65 AH, a group known as the Tawabun, or the Penitents, visited.
Who were they?
This was an army of about 4,000 men who deeply regretted not coming to Imam Hussein's aid. Before marching into a battle they knew they probably wouldn't survive, they stopped at the simple grave in Karbala, wept, and sought forgiveness.
That is a powerful image. 4,000 men standing around a dirt trench in the desert. But you mentioned the state tried to erase the site. What did they actually do?
It went through cycles of severe destruction. For a long time, the only marker helping pilgrims find the trench was a single lotus tree that grew near the grave. The Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid actually ordered that tree cut down so pilgrims wouldn't have a natural landmark to guide them in the dark.
Wow. Literally cutting down a tree just to hide a grave. That is extreme paranoia.
It gets worse. A later caliph, al-Mutawakkil, in the year 236 AH, was so determined to stop the private gatherings that he completely razed the site.
He destroyed it.
Completely. He ordered the ground to be plowed over by oxen, cultivated, and then he literally diverted water from the river to flood the entire area. He wanted every physical trace of the tomb washed away and forgotten.
Hold on. He flooded it. He diverted a river to wash away a mud grave.
Yes, he did.
Doesn't trying to physically erase a site actually make it more permanent in the minds of the people? I mean, al-Mutawakkil flooding the land didn't wash away the memory. If anything, going to such extreme, absurd lengths only proved how terrified his massive empire was of this single patch of dirt.
That is exactly what happened. The Sith's attempts to erase it completely backfired. The memory proved far more resilient than the physical destruction.
Because the people just wouldn't let it go.
Right. People kept sneaking to the site at night using hidden landmarks, passing down the coordinates from generation to generation. And eventually, the political winds shifted.
When did the big shrines actually start being built then? When did it go from a hidden, flooded plain to monumental architecture?
The monumental architecture we associate with Karbala today didn't really begin until the Umayyad dynasty, around the year 371 AH. They were the first to build porches, walls, and formal structures over the site.
And then it just grew from there?
Yeah, after them, the Safavid and Qajar empires invested massively in expanding the shrines. They covered them in gold and intricate tile work, effectively turning a quiet, hidden gravesite into a major imperial pilgrimage destination.
It is an incredible historical journey. From a quiet, terrifying night where a few villagers from the Banu Asad stood in the desert trying to identify headless bodies to bury them in a trench, to emperors flooding the ground, to empires building gold domes over it.
It really spans the extremes of human history.
It does. And it leaves you with something very deep to ponder. The true resilience of history isn't really in marble or masonry or gold, is it? It is in communal memory. The physical footprint of the year 61 AH was simple, it was harsh, and it was brutal. The grand shrines we see today were built much, much later by empires. Perhaps the most authentic way to connect to that history isn't by looking at the gold domes, but by closing your eyes and imagining that quiet desert night and the incredible weight of the task those few villagers faced as they dug that trench in the baked clay.
Absolutely.
To rebuild your mental peace and legacy today, give charity, sponsor a student, and plant a tree. May Allah grant us success. Don't forget to, come on, let's go. Don't forget to follow this channel, The Missing Dots. Thank you.